friends? What's up, OOUXers? We all love a good success story, right? Especially one that we can learn a lot from. And boy, do I have one for you today. So today I'm sharing a conversation I had with Will Poole, who is an OOUXer working in the London area at an agency called Kyan. And we'll be talking about how he's been adapting OOUX for his clients and how he's been bringing it into the process at his team. So we're going to be talking specifically about how he brought OOUX to a redesign of an internal app for the Premier League. So that's football/soccer for us Americans. And this app is actually an app for coaches. And we're going to get into all the details on how this played out with this really kind of fun, exciting client. So before we jump in, I want to let you know that yes, people have been asking me about this. And yes, the recording for that epic, some people said mind-blowing, May 16th class that I ran on OOUX for AI and AI for OOUX. That recording is available in a really snazzy mini course format. I even created a brand new whimsical board for you to copy and use as you work through the class and like really get your hands dirty with some of these concepts. So this class is for you if you want to see and experience and actually play with and practice how your OOUX and information architecture and basically your like structure-y, content-y, data-y skills can become so freaking valuable in designing for AI. So, and also if you want just like a behind the scenes look at how I'm using it and how I'm using the ORCA process to create my own GPTs. So it's really tactical. You're going to get my Notion template to create your own OOUX-based content strategy for an AI knowledge base and a whole bot ecosystem. So if you have not been tasked with doing that yet at your organization, it is just a matter of time before that starts happening. So I also go into actually how you can use the ORCA process to help you identify places where artificial intelligence being integrated is just going to be really, really strategic for your end users and for your business. So it just, because the ORCA process helps you break stuff down, that's why we love it, right? It helps you break down complexity and see how all the parts can work together as a whole, actually even objectifying the relationships, hence the ORCA process, objects, relationships, CTAs, and attributes. Breaking it all down, we can actually look at all those parts and we can say, ooh, this is a part here that is going to be really, really amazing to integrate AI. And this is how we can integrate AI. So also in just helping you innovate through AI, this is going to be a really, really interesting class for you. So access to the class portal, it's only $37. That is exactly what I charge for the live event. And actually, like, I'm not going to lie, even watching the recording might even be more useful because you're going to be able to pause it, go to that whimsical diagram board that I created and actually follow along. So the ability to pause for this particular class, it is about a 2-hour and 20-minute class, is going to be, I think, actually create an even better experience. So if you were at the live event, you got the amazing stuff about it being live, the chat, the Q&A. But I would actually, if you already have access to the class, I would actually recommend a rewatch of that with that new whimsical board that I made so that you can follow along and pause and everything. So if you are not already in the class, go to OOUX.com/AI and you'll be able to enroll there. Okay, let's jump into this conversation with Will. Welcome to the Object-Oriented UX podcast, a podcast about tackling complexity head-on, gracefully organizing massive amounts of information, and designing scalable, future-proof, and of course, naturally intuitive object-oriented user experiences. An OOUXer is a powerful blend of information architect, business analyst, facilitator, and UX strategist. If this sounds like you or what you aspire to, you are so in the right place. I'm Sophia Prater, UX designer, chief evangelist of Object-Oriented UX, and your host. Let's jump into it. So today on the podcast, I have got Will Poole. Will Poole is the UX director at Kyan. Am I pronouncing that right? Kyan.
Kyan, yes.
Kyan.
And head of UX as well.
Head of
On
UX,
that.
director of UX.
Yeah.
You're leading the charge of UX at Kyan,
Yeah.
which is an agency based out of London. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. We're based in the countryside of Guildford, which is a lovely little town, just
Oh,
30 minutes, fast train out of direct from London.
beautiful. Love the countryside. Hopefully you get to see some crop circles every now and then, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
just a few.
We're not going to get onto crop circles. We're not going to do that. You've been at Kind for I think like almost 6 years now, and then
Yeah.
have over 15 years of experience and counting within the UX world. So you're just really passionate. It's based on your bio. Very passionate about creating digital experiences that are simple and delightful and actually make a difference for the end user. You've gotten to work with organizations like Apple and Amazon and WorldPay. And the one that I'm really excited to talk about is the Premier League and kind of the work that you did with them, with that client, and how you kind of brought the ORCA process and OOUX to them. So, but I kind of want to start at the beginning because we
Absolutely.
we actually had, we actually did have one call before, like a
Yes, we
while
did.
ago. I was like, it's so good to meet you in person finally. But we did actually have a call. And I remember asking you, that was, I don't know, like a year ago or something, about like
Yeah.
how you found out about OUX. And you said that you had that A List Apart article, the dinosaur article from 2015, in your favorites for years. And then
Yeah.
you would just kind of like bring it back up. And just recently you had like a holy shit moment.
Yeah, very much so. And actually, like that list apart article, how I came across that was actually coincidentally, me and you were on one of Jared Spool's Talk UX sessions that happened on the Monday night. And that's how I discovered it because you were there and there was, I think, some sort of question. And then you said the concept of object oriented UX. And I was just like, hold up, what is that all about? Like, I understand like UX and like how that's what kind of all evolving, but like the object orientated side of things, like never kind of like from like a design background, and that's where I come from, and like I've dabbled and been taught in various development technologies and everything, but like just the concept of object orientated UX I never came across, and that's when I then did a little bit of research and everything and found your article on List Apart about it and started to get a bit of an understanding from that. And that was, I think that was going back like 2017, 2018,
Mm-hmm.
and started to read about it all. And this is, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is before like you had even kind of like established ORCA as a
Right.
framework to
That
kind of really
wasn't
help kind of
until,
like gauge
yeah, that wasn't until
later
2019
on.
that that pulled together.
Massively so. And but the thing was is that like going back to it now and like rereading it, it's all there. Like your thinking's there and like those building blocks, but it hadn't been kind of articulated at that point. And at the time when I read it, and this was prior to joining Kyan, and I thought, wow, this is some heavy stuff, like some really great stuff in here. But at the place where I was before Kyan kind of thing, I thought that this may be a bit of a tall order. Like trying to get this kind of concept in could really be quite a lot kind of thing. So through then I had the opportunity to come to work to Kyan and everything. And it was one of those things like you said, I had it in my save. Like I knew it was something that like there was a lot of potential there. And I wanted like one day to really work out like how could I effectively bring that in the right place that culturally like kind of and positively was accepting of like new approaches and wanting us to experiment. And Kyan was definitely one of those places. And we were doing all manner of different things, but it wasn't until about the start of 2023 where on one of my feeds up pops your introducing ORCA, the third diamond to your UX approach. And I was just like, hello, what's this? Let's have a look at this. And it just how you like perfectly like kind of like articulated and broken it down and everything. I was just like, here it is. This is what's like what I was looking for, not knowing that it was, but that was what I needed back in 2017 when I first discovered all the great work that you were doing, and up there, and I was like, this is something I can really roll with here, kind of thing. And because I discovered this back in 2023, you and Joe Natoli had, I think at that point, were just about to, or
Yep.
already had launched the fundamentals course.
Hmm.
And I was like, brilliant. Right, let's go and jump straight on that and really start to kind of like unpack this and like start to learn about all of this side of things on Udemy. And I say this to everybody that I speak to about it, is like it was essentially a glass shattering experience, not in a negative way where you just like gone and dropped something that like
Yeah.
an expensive piece of like furniture, or, sorry, a vase or anything, but a glass shattering experience in the way that it is just a completely different way. I say completely different way. The way that I think all of us need our eyes opening up to kind of really go and think about how we go about UX and thinking about the ways in which actually who are we actually doing this for? We're doing it for people. So why the hell wouldn't we not respect the way that people think and navigate their real world environments and replicate that for our digital experiences? I was just like, and and for me that was like the missing part for like UX. I've been always wanting to kind of find like UX has got so much potential, and it just kind of misses that bit sometimes, or like there's always that little bit where you kind of go, this is all great, but there's that missing little jigsaw piece that kind of really completes this. And for me, I feel like that's the philosophy of what you've brought together with object-oriented UX, and twin with that, the framework that you've nicely put together about how you can successfully deliver that to create really impactful and meaningful experiences for people, kind of thing.
I
So
love.
that, yeah, sorry, in a long way, shape, or form, that's the kind of origin stories of like how I basically discovered it.
And I think that I love that story because I think that that's so. I think a lot of people listening, for those that are listening, does that resonate? You know, I think that, but finding that original article back in 2015, 2017, it made the rounds on the internet. A lot of people read that article, saved it somewhere, put it in the back of their mind, said, that's cool, but not really sure how to actually implement that, how to actually get that adopted on a team. How do I actually do it? And then it kind of comes back around in some shape or form, whether it's through another article or somebody else mentioning it. It gets brought back up into their zeitgeist, and it is entering the global zeitgeist more and more, which is good. But it kind of comes back up, and then it's okay. There's a Udemy course. Let's do the Udemy course, and then it's what's next, what's after that. So you did actually enroll in the self-paced masterclass as well. You took that step. What was the decision-making process there to kind of, you'd done the Udemy course, you'd done amazing stuff just from the Udemy course and being able to implement it. What did that look like in your head, or what did that sound like in your head when you're like, okay, I'm going to take a step further?
Yeah, so yeah, so basically, with the fundamentals course, you're very clear up front, kind of thing. It's looking at like the discovery round, which is round one, and then we've got round four, which is representation through the sketching wireframing side of things. But it's that bit in the middle, which was the requirements and prioritization. And naturally, through what I learned, and also getting a few of my colleagues onto the fundamentals course as well, which I'll come back onto in a little bit, we had already started to, based on our experience of research, design, and building digital products, we were just like naturally trying to define the requirements and then prioritize. Like we were prioritizing objects maps like straight off the back of like discovery round,
Mm-hmm.
but there was still a lot of like unanswered questions or a lot of complexity that like needed, as you say, wrangling, because that's what it is. It's like we're having to wrangle huge amounts of complexity and in our case, within an agency setting, within, and fireworks have just gone off on my screen. Apologies.
AI doing things for us based on our hand gestures. That is so distracting. Okay. And no way to turn it off. Like, there's no, where's the off button? I don't know.
Oh, I had laser discos going the other night and looked like I was in a rave in a client meeting.
Goodness.
It was embarrassing. Thank you, AI, for all that wonderful piece of like useful.
Side note on AI: when we're designing for AI, there always needs to be a clear off button. How do I get out of this? Okay.
Exactly.
What were you saying before the fireworks? We're not going to cut that out. We're going to leave that in there.
Right. So let me backtrack.
Prioritization. So you'd already been doing the prioritization, and then it was the requirements. There was still kind of unanswered questions and complexity.
Yeah, absolutely. So the like with this, it's like we're coming at it from like research and design side of things, and then we're trying to like get this into development, and we're bringing in people from development. So bringing in people to development just to kind of like get exposed to this or kind of get an understanding. But when it starts getting into like the delivery of a digital product kind of thing, it was very clear that round 2 and 3 quite vital, getting down into the detail and really kind of going and like what's the meat on the bone around these objects, the relationships, the call to actions that we can do, and the content that can make up these things through the attributes. And where's this all coming from? What are the dependencies? And it's the stuff around like my cat fire saving department and all of those things.
My cat saving department.
It's all of those things that you allude to, kind of thing. But we know, like, it's not our first rodeo, like building digital products, but we know that like those are kind of some. I think there's some really kind of like valuable learnings that we still got to learn, and that's why it was so clear to me after doing the fundamentals course that this is just the start of the journey, and there's some great things in the masterclass to kind of learn on and everything. But the one thing that I've learned in before doing the masterclass is that all the wealth of knowledge and the practices and the approaches that you're teaching us, we've got to work out how that kind of works within our setting and everything, and not kind of take it verbatim. Because if you take it verbatim, there's just going to be like challenges, pushbacks, and everything like that. So it's that kind of whole kind of thing of like literacy and fluency kind of thing. Like it's like taking a recipe. You got to read that recipe and like try that recipe to begin with. But over time, you can then start to learn how to kind of slightly adapt it so it doesn't lose the value and the purpose of what that activity is trying to essentially help you do. But knowing how to flex it and also the order of that at the right time to get the most out of that specific kind of time with the client or the stakeholders or the end users, to really make sure that you're making the best use of time. And I'll reiterate that, because time, like in our case compared to like an in-house team, time is still equally important for them, but we've got kind of shorter engagement times. Like it massively varies, as well as people's our clients and stakeholders digital literacy kind of thing. So we've got to make the call as to like how much on like the dial do we want to crank this up and kind of expose it, like the whole process to them, versus like actually we just need you to kind of help us answer these questions, help us get this context to enable us to move forwards and complete essentially the workings of ORCA. We may not need to show you the whole lot of it. We don't want to scare you off. But for those people who do want to be a part of that, come along for the ride, because you're going to learn something awesome along the way about how we can start thinking differently about how we can approach our problems and ultimately get to our desired outcomes.
I love that you said that, because that is actually in the advanced training that I've been teaching. There's the master class, and then I've created another advanced training as well. And that is the main theme of the advanced training, is that this is, how do you adapt it? How do you flex it? How do you change it? Like, the rules, now you can start breaking the rules. And that comes out in the master class too. In the Udemy course, it gives you that foundational piece, but actually, to make the ORCA process more realistic, the masterclass helps you learn to do that and gives you the confidence to start adapting it and changing it and mixing it up and remixing it with stuff that you already know, and kind of gives you, I think you said, that fluency or that literacy that you need. Like, when you're first learning a language, you're kind of constrained because you only have a few words. You can't really, like, you're not using slang and colloquialisms, and you're not mixing and matching it. You can't really be that creative with, like, I've been learning Spanish, and right now it's like so much just memorization, and I just go in there and I have my little phrases that I can use to order my coffee, but like, I can't talk philosophy in Spanish right now. I can't be funny in Spanish unless it's just me being funny, because, like, I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm using a word incorrectly. Like, I can't intentionally be funny in Spanish, right? So there's like a really nice metaphor here of, like, being fluent in that language lets you be flexible in that language. And the Udemy course isn't necessarily going to do that. Y'all did amazing work with just the Udemy course. And definitely, I think it's almost like a proof of concept. Like, do the Udemy course, start playing with it, see the value, and you're going to run into questions. You're going to run into places where, like, you just hit a wall, because you don't have things like my cat saving fire department. We're throwing around all sorts of acronyms and mnemonics here, but just for anybody who is just jumping into the OOUX podcast, ORCA stands for Objects, Relationships, Calls to Action, and Attributes. My cat saving fire department is specifically within the requirements round for relationships, and that stands for mechanics, cardinality, sorts, filters, and dependencies, and it's a way that we analyze relationships. So there's just getting that out there. Don't want to be that person using acronyms on my podcast and not defining them, because I've definitely been guilty about that before. But yes, it does help so much with that flexibility, and the ORCA process gets, I'll say, people can look at it and be like, 4 rounds and 15 steps, like, that sounds like too much process. That sounds like it's really rigid. And it sounds like what you've seen is you've been able to experience that flexibility.
Yeah, massively so. But it's not been like easy to a degree. And like, when you're first starting out as well with this, is like when you're starting to bring people into it and they haven't gone on the same journey you have, and they come in with all these great ideas, like, how about if we just do it this way and do it that way? And right at the beginning, I was in that very much case of, like, I'm reading the recipe at the moment. I'm still trying to learn this. Please, can we not change the recipe just yet? Because I don't know what the implications of that to be are. So what I would say for anybody who is starting out into object-oriented UX and using the ORCA framework is be prepared for people coming along with some really great ideas, like, to kind of like essentially they're wanting to adapt it so it can better help them within their workflow. And that's just them trying to kind of like understand how does this fit within their world without having to go through the journey that you're going on in learning all of this kind of thing. And have an element of confidence and standing your ground about kind of going, I'm hearing everything that you're saying, and let's work through this. And how can we kind of start doing that flexing, knowing that you're still on the journey and that you can always iterate on this and come back to it. But there is an element of this where we've got to kind of follow it initially by the book. And then once we've seen what the results of that is, and we can kind of essentially retrospectively look on it, it's like, all right, okay, cool. Like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Or this way was probably the better way. But like, how do we together kind of now adapt this so we know that if we ever come in this like scenario again, we know how to navigate that. And one of those examples actually was the system models. So the way that you introduced system models to relation as the precursor to the relationships, But when we got into the nested object matrix and then just said, here you go, here's our output, everybody was just like, what? I'm just seeing boxes, everything.
It's a
So I
lot.
was like, it's a lot, but at the same time, it's like trying to do a system model of the whole entire thing. It's like, as you say, it's a massive spaghetti mess. But the thing that we did there was that we actually went, let's go back to the system models, but only define the object and just the relationships from there. Um, and no, and not extending that
Hmm.
to the next one. And then we just had these little kind of little trees of everything, and we put the object definition above it, so everybody saw the object name, they understood what it was, they saw that, and all of the relationships for just that one object. And then we were like, great. Well, we know the purpose of the relationships is to basically navigate through content. So let's talk about scenarios. We want someone to navigate from A through to B to C. Let's bring those little system models and then just draw the lines. And essentially, we've got the content navigation right there through our system
Yes.
models and nicely maps back to our nested object matrix for those people who can and want to spend a bit more time to really understand the nested object matrix. And that was just one of the things that we did where we kind of like, let's tweak this a little bit. And it was such a really cool way of quickly showing and demonstrating to people a main navigation is not the main way that a user should navigate through. It's through the power of content. And as people have said on past podcasts and everything, and so have you, is that the navigation is the fire escape at the end of the day. And
Hmm.
if they need to make a course correction or need to recover, and that's what
Yes.
it's there for.
And by main navigation, meaning that kind of like static top bar, sidebar, or something like
Stuff,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
app
your fire
navigation on
escape.
the bottom. Yeah, exactly that.
Okay, so I love that you brought that up because I have screenshots on my computer right now of those system model nested object matrix hybrids. So I am like, right after we get off this interview, I'm going to make a LinkedIn post about it. I'm going to send people to your talk. We'll also put the link in the show notes of that LinkedIn post and Will's talk about Premier League. And I cannot wait to get to we've got to start talking about Premier League
Yeah, we
because
do.
I
Yeah.
have so many questions about that. But and that was definitely one of them. I just want like, and so I'm so glad that you brought that up because I'm definitely going to be stealing that. Those are amazing artifacts. It really does simplify. So if you're listening right now, you really need to look at these. So go to the show notes, click on that LinkedIn post, and you can see exactly what we're talking about here because you really got to see it. They're really, I mean, all of your artifacts are freaking gorgeous. And you've just done really,
Thank
really
you.
nice things with like the object cards and how you're documenting it and making it accessible to people. So I'm curious with those system model nested object matrix little like mini hybrids that just focus in on a single object and how you can navigate through to another object you want people to get from point A to point B. Who was the audience? Was it the client that was the audience or was that your internal team or even developers? Who was looking at those little snippets?
All of them, basically. So, yeah, so everywhere from like, it was more the product manager who was the point of contact at the time. When we were working on that particular requirement for Premier League, there was a changing of the guard not too long ago, and we'll come on to that a little bit later on, kind of thing. But it's going in a really cool, like, new direction, kind of thing with the app. But the workings and everything have like really kind of set a foundation, and we're in the process of helping them kind of reset foundations and how to kind of keep all that goodness, kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
there. But yeah, to your question, yeah, it was definitely to the client, to who's the product manager there, and to kind of really just understand the power of like not navigating through the main navigation, but through content and how you can create those relationships and opportunities for further relationships, as well as kind of again kind of changing the perspective of people within the design team and just generally here at Kyan about the power of navigating through content instead of the main navigation, but being able to do it in a way that it was actually again, which is lovely is, and the power of ORCA is that when you bring it to developers and you start talking about relationships and cardinality, so like has 0 to 1, has one to many kind of thing, they're getting on board with this like really easily because their mind is already there. Like they're already thinking as in databases and the relationships to it. So like that was also another like like positive revelation and just such a lovely feeling to be able to kind of talk to a developer, collaborate with developers right at the beginning when typically like conveyor belt process kind of thing, like just typically that we just see kind of thing, everybody throws something over the fence. It's like it's just naturally aiding those conversations and getting everybody onto the same page. Yeah, there's a bit of learning curve, especially from our side kind of thing from a design when we're having to actually kind of get a little bit more up to speed with like how development speaks about their discipline kind of thing. And I've got to wish I listened more about database structures back at school. Is all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, but what a good feeling that is. Where before there's kind of gears grinding, where you're doing that handoff to developers, and they look at your prototype, and they're like, oh, well, those two databases don't talk to each other, and wish we had known this 3 weeks ago. And you being able to bring them in early and talk cardinality to them, and you see their eyes light up, like that is such a good feeling to be like, yes, I understand
Massively.
cardinality too from a user experience perspective, because it's not just from development. You get the cardinality wrong, and you can really screw over the user experience if you make it a has one where it really needs to be a has many. Like the example I give all the time is coming into a medical technology client. They had in their database a doctor has one location, and it actually is a doctor has 0 to many locations. A doctor can be virtual. A doctor doesn't have to have a location. They had required that a doctor had to have a location, and some doctors were completely virtual, and most doctors actually had many locations, so they were having to like hack the system because the cardinality was wrong. And yeah, to be able to talk to a developer about that, and they love it because it's so important on how they organize the database, and it's important to the user experience too.
Absolutely. For us, like we kind of did a UX audit before jumping into like the startings of each of the steps of ORCA. So when we got to that, that was us taking a stab as to like, this is what we see. Have we got this right to the developer? And they were like, yes, yes, yes. Ooh, interesting. Is that right? And for us, we were then starting to kind of like get on the same page as to how things were working or actually how things could improve, basically. So it was really nice to be able to kind of do that, get that validation from the developer, and then kind of basically say, yes, for like the large majority, you've got this, but there's one or two bits where I can fill in the missing gaps. And that, again, that's the power. Like it's filling in the missing gaps
Mm-hmm.
and being able to bring that like right up front instead of at the 11th hour. And it has massive implications
Yes.
behind that side of things.
Yes. Filling in those gaps early, getting the developer to understand where the gaps are so that they could be working in parallel and not waiting on wireframes. It's a beautiful thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so one more question before we get into
Go
this
for it.
this amazing case study. Okay, so you started mentioning like, okay, this sort of conveyor belt process. Tell me a little bit about what life looked like before you really started implementing the ORCA process, and like why were you sort of searching for something, but like what were the big frustrations that you were hoping OUX would help with, and that OUX did end up helping with? What were some of those really big pain points from like the first, from the years before, the before times?
The years before.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to go a little bit before Kyan, basically. And it's that typical thing, client comes along saying, we've got a great idea, we want this solution and everything, and here's like this really kind of thick, to the size of a Bible, like project spec doc.
Mm-hmm.
Please just go and deliver this and just work within the boundaries of that. So within that, trying to understand that, trying to get a grasp of like their business goals and objectives, So, and then also like who the target audience is, and then go through that kind of step of like, if there is the ability to do research, we would love to do it, but it's research was very much of a case of like back then it's just like there's how much time is that going to take? Is that going to like just completely blow the budget because you need to spend all this time researching? It's like no, try like there's value in this, and there's just like no, like, let's go straight into information architecture. Let's start architecting all of this out and everything, and lean on all of our subject matter experts who speak to all of our customers day in day out. So it's kind of like you're having to make those compromises and kind of go, okay, fine, I need to go and find the people who do speak to those the end customers and really kind of get it secondhand where I can't get that that insight about our end users and what their current problems are. And then that helping to inform basically artifacts like information architecture from sitemaps to task flows, all the way through to then taking that into wireframes and then kind of having different fidelities of wireframing kind of thing, because put a black and white wireframe in somebody's in front of one of the stakeholders and they say, why is my logo black and white, when you're trying to get them to really look at like actually it's the structure of the page, how this plays a part in like the navigation experience and everything surrounding that, and then taking that into high fidelity design and then into development, whilst trying to wherever possible, ending up having to do guerrilla testing and research because you need to get some sort of validation whether or not you're on the right tracks, and then hope to God when it does launch, you've hit the mark kind of thing. So there's UX in all of that. And in the past, and I think people can relate to this, is that UX is being possibly put on people or being the responsibility of one or a couple of people. And like, that's your domain, like that, you just do that kind of thing. And there's a lot of pressure and everything. And like trying to find all these answers and everything, it's like pushing the boulder up a hill kind of thing. And I think now, like, look back then and comparing it to now, my stance on just UX and how we do UX is it cannot be the responsibility of one. It must not be the responsibility of one. It needs to be a shared ownership of contributing to UX, because UX at the end of the day is an outcome that we achieve. It is not a thing that we produce. We produce artifacts to help us achieve a great user experience that is fed by good insights, a clear vision for where we're going, that is guided by good understood outcomes for both the business and the end user. And from that, we can then go back to the current experience today and really start understanding where are those problems in the end-to-end of the experience, and really kind of go, well, where are those moments of pure frustration where we need to focus on first?
Right.
And that's where I've been kind of like where I've come from, where I've been on this journey trying to get to that. But there's always been this particular, like I say, this missing jigsaw puzzle where it kind of just knits everything together in like when you're defining essentially what it is that we're doing, properly structured, that reflects actual mental models of our users. Importantly, we can prove and tie it back to the business objectives, and making sure that everybody's on the same page with that. From there to like where we are now and where we want to be going, we've got to be that. I think I hope I'm not the only one who's gone through that journey.
Well, what it sounds like, and I've heard this a lot, is, and I think you mentioned this in your case study talk, is that this helps break down those silos, and to have this like thread that kind of crosses all those different disciplines and brings everybody together to have that shared language and that shared understanding, and shared responsibility as well for what are the things, how do they relate to each other, what do people need to do to those things, and what are the little bits and pieces of attributes that make up those things. Like, that should not be just on UX, right? Like, as UX designers, we can lead that process, we can facilitate, but it's like not up to us to decide on that. Really, that's going to be from the business, that's going to be from the users, of course, and from our technology partners of like, okay, what can we do? What is possible? Do we have access to this data? How expensive is that data? From our content creators as well. Like, all of that, everybody needs to come together for that. And the ORCA process helps us do that. And we can be the shepherds of that, but it's not going to be, at the end of the day, it's not going to be our decision to do that. So yeah, breaking down those silos and bringing people together to have a shared language.
That's it at the end of the day is, you're better when you're a team of people than just being working by yourself.
And so that's like kind of the before times maybe was like more siloed, more of that conveyor belt, more like, and now you add the UX, and now we're going to add the UI, and now we're going to add the development, and kind of maybe waterfall with a little bit of like agile-ish going on. And a lot of, I mean, in the client or in the agency space, we do get a lot of that kind of like, it's not really agile. We might call it agile, but it is very, very waterfall, because we have it's like the project begins, and then we have a deadline, and then we have to hand it off.
Yeah, agile.
What's up, OUXers? There is something very important that I have neglected to do in the first 50 episodes of this podcast, and that is to implore you, dear listener, for review. So here I am, asking ever so nicely for you to drop a rating and review of the OUX podcast into either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This can really help us spread the OUX love. So if you've gotten any value from OUX and the ORCA process, which I'm assuming you have since you're here, I'd be so appreciative for a few minutes of your time. Okay, so how to do this? Don't actually go click on the rating metadata, because that would be way too intuitive. On Apple Podcasts, go to the podcast detail page, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see some big stars down there that you can add stars. And then underneath that, there is another little link that says create a review. So that would be amazing. And on Spotify, you've got to do this on the mobile. On Spotify mobile, go to the 3-dot menu on that detail page and hit rate. And actually on Spotify, even on an episode detail, you can leave a comment there too. If you scroll down the episode detail, there'll be something that says something like, how did you like this episode? And feel free to put your thoughts there. Thank you so much, and happy OUXing. Okay, so Premier League.
Cool.
Tell me about this client. What were you tasked with? What was the problem that they needed solving?
Yeah, no worries. So, interestingly, this is off the back of the fundamentals course. I really wanted to kind of look for projects where we could kind of safely test some of these, like essentially the process of ORCA. And we're already working with the Premier League, and we've been helping them to basically create a mobile app for professional coaches across the English football landscape, across multiple game partners, everything from the Premier League to the EFL to the Women's Super League, so on and so forth, kind of thing. And it's really, back then, like the purpose of the app was to really kind of help professional coaches around their personal development and supporting their continuing learning kind of thing. So this app was very much a case of like delivering that content, but at the same time building this kind of career progression kind of tracking aspect of it, where you could like log goals, put actions into it, and then put like reflections into it as notes.
Okay. So your target user is, to translate, professional soccer coaches.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, exactly that. And there's this requirement that came up one day that basically says, look, we want to create essentially, it was called connections. It was a case of like trying to encourage the conversation of people's development action plans with one another, and we're trying to work out like what is the value of that, what is the best way of trying to add value to the experience of all of that, and like what's like the slimmest version of that we can do versus like bringing that conversation completely within the app side of things. So we started, as I said earlier on, with a UX audit because we wanted to first understand, we got that kind of traditional requirements, it must do X, Y, and Z kind of thing. But we first needed to understand what the impact would be to the rest of the app experience. And the project didn't start with ORCA when it first came in, so it was very much a case of like I was bringing ORCA into it, and I didn't want to upset the apple cart and kind of like go, by the way, I just got to like pause this whole thing and we need to start all over again. I needed to work in like how can I bring in ORCA, which was a perfect candidate for this particular bit, get a quick understanding of like what are all the surrounding like objects and all their relationships, and then understand how does this particular feature request slot in and need to form the additional relationships, tweak, refine, add more call to actions, take call to actions out, and add all the additional content attributes from core content to metadata. So me and my colleague Louise Green, who was the product designer for it, we prior to getting onto the Premier League, we had worked on another project where I introduced her to ORCA to help her kind of get on board with this, and we kind of like experimented it there. So she had a little bit of initial understanding, and like it wasn't a brand new experience to her, and bringing ORCA into the Premier League. So, like I said, we screenshotted the whole entire of the current build versus what we got on the designs, and then basically did noun forging on the screenshots, and like just looked at, identified what we thought were all of the objects that were there. We then started to create all the relationships, and that then basically set us all up to then do an internal ORCA workshop. So we brought the project team together, and we basically said, look, this is the first time that we're doing this. So there may be times where like we may need to break away just to kind of work out a little bit more, and we can kind of bring it in, but we want to kind of trial this with you guys and see what we can do with this collaboratively. So we set out all of the boards, the activity boards in FigJam, and with the visual UX audit and everything, we had that next to it so they could see where we like our initial working out. And the first thing was to do was basically go, right, let's consolidate our objects. And in that, within like probably the first half hour, we had to stop the whole thing because we were like, wait a minute, we cannot get alignment as to these two fundamental objects, because one was called development action plan and the other one was called action plan. And we're like, are these the same? Are these two different things? So we're like, wait a minute, let's pause this. We'll put that to one side. Let's go through all the other objects for the moment. And we wrote out what the definitions for each of those objects were. So we as a team were complete alignment as to what those were. It mapped back to the understanding of what the developers knew that these objects were being, and it was in respect of what the end users would be thinking about. So yeah, we paused, got that information back from the client, and landed on it was development action plan. That's what it's referred to. That's what it's known as within the professional coaches terminology and language. So it was like perfect, brilliant, got that, and we then moved on. And then we went on to the relationship side of things, and again, that's where we had that kind of collaborative conversation, and it was through that. That's where the system models got birthed as a result of doing that activity, because it was full on, and it is full on. It is one of like the parts where there's a lot of thinking going on, trying to get everybody to kind of get on the same page as to the cardinality language and everything. But credit to everybody, like they got it, they understood it. We went away, we kind of like thought about it a little bit more, and then came back and then played it back to the developers and our product manager to get our thinking on it.
So let me ask you real quick about the glossary. Well, I'm glad you brought the action plan, because that is, when the gears grind and you kind of come to a halt, that doesn't mean the process isn't working. That means the process
No.
is working, right? That means like, oh, we
Yeah.
discovered something where we have a really, really hot ticket for our client of like, wait a second, we just realized we don't understand something. We didn't even know we didn't understand something until going through the process. And then like, oh, are these two things the same or are these different? Like one of my favorite questions to ask a client, and being able to figure that out and saying, okay, we do understand. This is all the stuff that we do understand. We can keep moving with that. We have definitions. We're all on the same page. And in your talk, you show that glossary and you show, okay, here's our current objects and here's future objects. So yeah, like jumping right into prioritization. Did that help with like one thing you said that that ORCA helps with is alignment on what will be designed and developed? Was that like you were kind of getting into scope, right? Like what are we which is a huge issue from working in agencies for years. Like that is a huge issue. Like what are we actually designing and developing here?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. So we went back to the project requirements kind of thing, because you could essentially go like, let's just build LinkedIn, and it's like we don't have the time, we don't have the resource for this, and the client doesn't have the budget to build a LinkedIn version of this kind of thing. So what is we started kind of going like, what are the bare essential objects do we need versus ones that actually there could be value, but we just can't do it right now. But it's important to define those, to have sight of those. And this is just a kind of general approach that I just do in ORCA, and my colleagues do with ORCA now, is that we will define all like the kind of possible objects, but the core objects, we want to kind of cap that to a sensible amount, between no more than like 12 at the very most kind of thing. But anything beyond that and anything that we can't achieve, we're essentially creating an object backlog. And at the very end of this, please remind me of this, because I will tell you an example of how we went and did that for another client in such a way that we ended up building out a object roadmap across multiple releases. But yeah, essentially it really helped us to kind of get that proper focus and kind of like challenge ourselves. And that was through having an open debate with everybody cross-functionally to go, what is that MVP kind of finished slice of actually delivering a valuable experience for this feature, and that we can come back to, iterate and build upon and extend it. So that first version was going to basically, it was to download a PDF, a digital PDF of the action plan that they could have as an offline conversation that came from the app kind of thing. And then the next version of that was to build in connections to then allow the ability to share the action plan within the app itself.
Yes.
So there, and that export PDF, that wasn't building connections. That was something that we could deliver really quickly, that delivered value while we could be working on the bigger bit. So that's how we were kind of thinking about it.
So it's like the action plan still became an object, but then in future iterations, the action plan would become more robust. It would be, you could do more things. You could add connections to the action plan. It wouldn't just be like downloading the PDF. So it's almost like, and that is the beauty of prioritizing through your O's, your R's, your C's, and your A's. Sometimes it's an object just like doesn't make it in at all. Sometimes the object makes it in, but it makes it in as almost like a placeholder, like from the mental model. Like, yeah, you got an action plan, you download the PDF. But then later on, when it becomes more robust, it doesn't break the user's mental model of how this is working. It's like, oh, the action plan is still there. It's still called an action plan, but I can do more with it now. It's more powerful now, which I think that's such a big problem where people are, when they're adding features instead of kind of upgrading objects or adding a CTA, they add a feature and it's sort of like your cheese gets moved, to use the cliche phrase from a user perspective. Like things just kind of get moved around instead of like, no, the structure is basically the same. It's just like, ooh, now the action plan is upgraded. It does more. Cool.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So another thing I really wanted to talk about, and actually we need to go back to that roadmap. I'm going to remember that. So you had these amazing color-coded ORCA wireframes. So taking that, like, okay, we've got our column of the object map. Let's take it one level up. Mobile first. Let's prioritize those attributes, and then bring them into a color-coded wireframe, and then handing it to UI. So tell me about that transition. We've talked a lot about working with development, but working with visual design and working with UI. And I think you mentioned in the talk that it was like, it did feel like, you didn't say this exactly, but it did feel like perhaps this helped with like just letting the UI designers have freedom while still saying exactly what you wanted from a UX perspective. Like, did that help with kind of divide the line between UX and UI? And what was that transition like?
This is a really interesting bit. So, and we're still on a journey with this. So, from a UX point of view, we did those wireframes and massively kind of like helped with the transition of like going, this is what we need from like content and how we want to prioritize that. But me and Louise, the product designer, did that together. And that's where we found a lot of great things coming out of it, because where I've done it previously on the project beforehand with her, I just did the wireframes myself, the OUX style versions of those, and then I just like handed it over to her and showed it, and she was like, "I'm just seeing blocks of color, and I have no idea what blue, green, red, yellow all means," kind of thing, because I haven't got that deep understanding of it. We were talking about it and bringing her up to speed at the same time. Because the way that I first initially introduced it, ORCA, to her, and I think it's a really good way for anybody who is visually led, is actually starting with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And what I mean by that, for everybody who's listening, is broken objects, isolated objects, masked objects, and shape-shifting. And that's how I originally kind of started bringing in and kind of like looking at opportunities to, first of all, correct or find the opportunities to improve the existing designs and everything. So, like, but coming into the Premier League and everything, having that understanding and everything, it was a lot easier. And I think, like, in any case, if you're doing OUX style wireframes, it's great doing that with someone from UI, because they get to understand that. It's building their understanding. So if you did, from a UX point of view, give that artifact to a UI designer or product designer, at the end of the day, we're all designers. I can high fidelity prototype the whole thing, but having those people, those specialisms, if they have those together, doing those wireframes together, it helps improve the conversation. It helps the collaboration goes so much further, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the lovely thing I think about OUX style wireframes is that it doesn't take the creativity away from UI. They've still got that carte blanche to kind of render that however they want to, but at least they've got an understanding of the prioritization of content and what the difference is between core and metadata.
Yeah, instead of giving them like a basically high fidelity black and white wireframe, and it's just like, can you paint this? Can you paint this wireframe for me? Or, very low fidelity where it's just like boxes, a sketch of boxes, and like some lorem ipsum in there. And then there's too much of a disconnect. And having that, like, okay, this is what needs to be on the page. General prioritization, keep like, these things need to be prioritized, but like how you prioritize it, you prioritize it with size or color or placement. Like, you have that ability. And I just think it really creates that really nice handoff of like, as a UX designer, this is what I care about. And how you implement that prioritization, I actually, as a UX designer, should not be caring about that. That's not actually, like, for me, that's not what I'm good at. I can't do high fidelity wireframes. I don't have the design eye. So I loved being able to, and I still love being able to give a designer that mobile first. Like I usually don't even do desktop. I actually haven't done desktop wireframes in a really long time because it's like, that's going to be up to a visual designer. That's layout. Like, I don't want to be in the business of layout. I'm in the business of what is going to be on the page and how is it prioritized. And I use the term page loosely. Okay. Okay. So what is next for Kyan? Like, you've talked about a 5-day ORCA sprint. Where do you feel like you have room to move the process even forward within your agency?
So, basically, like here at Kyan, we've actually been on a bit of a journey over the past 5 months, actually defining our approach just holistically as an agency. And we've actually brought in the triple diamond as our approach because we see a lot of advantages and opportunities where that can kind of scale, be flexible, be nimble. And that's inspired partly by ORCA. So in there, we've got the middle diamond and we call it out as discovery, investigation, requirements, prioritization, and representation. And that is the bedrock there. And we've got an ORCA as one of our activities in addition to all the other things that we do in definition as part of that. Mm-hmm. So that's at a macro level, we're starting to try and embed that up at an operational level, which is wonderful and so grateful that people are really are willing to kind of embrace that kind of that new way of thinking and everything along all the other things that we're doing at a micro level. As you mentioned earlier on, we're in the process of being on the self-paced masterclass. So we are upskilling our knowledge around round 2 and round 3 and wanting to bring that to development and delivery and really kind of start working within those two departments and really kind of show the value of how ORCA can really help within their respective tasks that they do and outputs they've got to do so that we can avoid having death by 1,000 questions from development when we hand over design and then helping delivery kind of get sight of actually what does a map look like of delivering this digital product. And then towards the end of the year, once I feel like we're in a good place, we've kind of got that level of knowledge underneath our belt. We're starting to become a little bit more fluent with that. We've understood where can we kind of flex that. The next step then is kind of looking at what does an ORCA sprint look like for us here at Kyan and looking at bringing that in because that's really exciting for us. And it's kind of full circle from where we first started when I joined with design sprints kind of thing. Like I said, design sprints definitely do have a place kind of thing. But imagine being able to do an ORCA sprint with all of that kind of input and insights and everything that could then help inform a design sprint from a UI point of view. Kind of go, here's everything that you need to do. Go to town. Let's be innovative as to how we want to render this and create a fantastic visual experience for it. And an ongoing kind of thing that we'll always be doing is just looking at how can we always improve our documentation and accessibility to be exposing ORCA and knowing to what level to expose the workings of ORCA to our stakeholders, to our clients, etc., so that they don't feel underwhelmed, like they've got to learn a completely new thing, that they're getting what they need out of it, and if they want to learn more and bring that into their ways of working kind of thing, looking to help them on that journey as well.
Beautiful. And I would just encourage everybody listening to check out Will's talk on YouTube. I'll link to it. It's just, you get to see all the beautiful documentation and all those visuals. Just really, really nice. So, okay, 2 last questions. I know we're quite a bit over. I told you, I knew that we were going to get on a roll.
Yeah.
Okay, one question for you is, okay, so there are tons of people, this is a little bit of a selfish question, but there's tons of people out there who read that article in 2017. Maybe they've done the Udemy course and they have got their finger on the button of enrolling in that masterclass, what would you say to those people? How do they know whether that decision might be right for them or not right for them? And how would you, like, what would you say if they were talking to you right now and they're like, I just don't know. Do I go? Do I invest in this education or do I not invest in this education to take that big leap into that 22-hour doozy
Yeah.
of a course?
Uh, do it. Like if you found value and you're able to show value from what you may have got from the fundamentals course, I would say like if you got that down, start there because you're going to get so much out of it. And I hope through what we've shared in our case study of it and everything, you can see how we've used it and hopefully be inspired by that. And by the time you get to the end of that fundamentals course, you you've got the hunger. Hopefully, you want to learn more kind of thing, and there is so much more. Like, um, and it's very easy that you want to like go into the masterclass and just jump to like round two straight away. But I implore you to like start at the beginning because no word of a lie, there are some hidden gems that also help with that round one where like it's just adding a lot of value to that. So if you have internal problems trying to kind of like get that investment and everything, it's about, I feel like through what we've done with our learning of the fundamentals and being able to demonstrate what we've been doing with that, that helps kind of provide evidence as to the value of what this can do and it has the potential. And then being able to find those key people within your organization who are natural advocates for what you're doing and what you're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this job to make a difference for people, whether or not it is for our clients or for our end users. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's well worth it.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that. And my last question is, so for Kyan, what kind of clients do y'all take on if somebody's looking to work with you and your organization? What's your ideal client look like? Because I know that there's probably listeners that are into OOUX and are looking for an agency to work with. So, yeah, who are the kind of folks y'all would love to work with?
Yeah. So we work from anybody who has got an idea from a startup kind of like idea all the way up to enterprise level. We are not specifically limited or niched to a certain size of client. We've had the opportunity to work with wonderful people who have come with like, I've got an idea, but I just don't know how to get there. That's great. Let us help you and let's go on the journey together to enterprise companies that are basically gone. We've got a new idea that we need to try and trial out or like and kind of like work out what this North Star looks like
Mm-hmm.
versus clients at enterprise level who are like, we need help quickly to kind of like have someone to come alongside our team and just work within us and like really learn from you guys as to how to improve things. So, and that's across any sector as well. It's such a variety of sectors that we work across, and we just love the challenge of it and like being able to kind of bring in like these new ways of tackling problems at the end of the day. So yeah,
And you're working with companies worldwide or really just in the UK?
yeah.
Worldwide.
Yeah, our main focus is like UK, but we work with global international
Okay.
organizations like working with like sort of the Weller Company. We've worked with clients over in the States before. We've worked on actually ran a project. We're using ORCA and that client was operating in three different time zones to launch this like new exciting app proposition kind of thing. So yeah, um,
And I
no problem.
just remembered, I do have one last question because I have my
Oh
blank sticky note here and we cannot forget. Give me the example of building the roadmap through, I guess, through an object glossary or an object guide.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we got a requirement from a client to build a multi-retailer shopping experience, and that's monumental. Like that's a big thing, and we were like, what the hell do we focus on first? And we used Orca. and we said like, right, what is the the MVP? What are the bare essential objects do we need to basically deliver the first release of this? So I think we ended up having about 60 objects or something like that. It was mental. But the thing is that what we did is that we used an object glossary and bucketed it by release and by what the theme of that release, the purpose of that release was trying to do. So the first kind of core objects was all focused around delivering the essential experience for delivering multi-retailer shopping. And then the next one was all focused around building out the extended shopping capabilities that just added to that, to the point where the last release, which was, I think was like release 4 or 5, was then looking at how do we improve retention through gamification and everything, and started looking at like all those different objects and everything. And then that basically gave us this lovely artifact where, again, it was all grouped by releases. We had the definitions, but we also provide the rationale for why that was there for that purpose and what it would be then dependent on future releases and vice versa.
Gorgeous. I mean, it's like almost like going in layers instead of sort of going in these chunks of like, let's do this flow and then this flow and then this flow, which I think a lot of times we break up our phases into flows, and then those flows are all overlapping. So instead chunking, it's like such a nice, clean way to divvy up the complexity. Is just dividing it by object.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Will, thank you so much for this lovely long conversation. Thank you for staying extra. We had a lot to cover. Anything else you got to say about OOUX or Kyan or anything before we wrap it up?
All I would say is that for people who are starting out on this, you're in for a journey. It's going to be a wonderful journey. And like I say, it's going to be, I hope it's that missing piece that you're looking for in your UX journey and everything. And there is a wonderful community that is growing. And yeah, if anybody's got any questions or queries about navigating OUX and ORCA within an agency setting, just connect with me on LinkedIn or whatever, and happy to have a cup of coffee or just jump on the Zoom call or whatever your choice of video call is, and be more than happy to share that. And
even Microsoft Teams. You'll even get on a Microsoft Teams. Maybe not. Okay, yeah. Tall order. Wonderful. We will put your LinkedIn in the show notes if anybody wants to take you up on that offer, and just also follow what Kyan is doing and what you're doing. And thank you so much again for being on the podcast. It was awesome. Thank you so much for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. Please visit objectorientux.com/podcast for show notes. Our soundtrack is Fighter by Ruby Vell, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Happy OOUXing!